Hello and welcome to Sisters Assembled, your home for all things MCU. And we have a sort of special episode because we got an interesting release because I think it got bumped up. But we are talking about Eyes of Wakanda this week, which was the animated release that Marvel put out just last week, this past week. And we liked it, so we're excited to talk about it. But before we do, we are going to be talking about all 4 episodes. So if you have not seen every single episode of Eyes of Wakanda, especially the last one, because there's a little bit of like spoilery stuff in there, we definitely recommend you go watch it and then come back and revisit this episode. You'll get a lot more out of it. You won't get anything spoiled. So with all that being said, I'm going to toss it over to Kate. She's going to give us her initial reactions to the show.
I didn't mind it. I mean, this was one of those shows I think from the jump I was like, because we all know how I look at shows and movies. I'm like, do we need it? Did I need to watch it? I don't know. I enjoyed watching it as a whole. Will I go back and watch it again? No, quite simply, it didn't like hit it out of the park. It's not X-Men 97 to me, where I'm actively always rewatching that and then breaking my own heart. Like it's not in that comparison to me, but I still think it was really interesting. I do see where there's potential, maybe if they were to want to do more of it, how they could expand it. I think my biggest complaint, if I want to just hit that out of the park from the jump, is I understand why they couldn't do it in all capacity because there were only 4 episodes and they spanned 4 different time periods. But I liked how the first and second episode called back to the main character in the first episode. And guys, I'm going to be honest, like names do not exist to me. I've watched it once. I tried to remember the name and then the next episode would be about a different character and I totally forgot what that first character would be called. Like I can't remember.
We also both just like are not good name people.
No,
like, at all.
No. I do think the first episode it's Noni. I think.
I have no idea. I literally can't even remember most days what I ate for breakfast, and I can't remember the name of like people I've met 6 times. So memory and names are not things that
I consciously during the first episode was like, all right, this is her name. And I do want to say it's Noni. But then then we went to the next episode and I was like, oh crap, they're not connected at all. So, because I knew nothing about this going into it for just the record. And I was like, oh crap. So then I definitely forgot her name. Then he was started with a B. I know that. But I like.
No, wasn't it Memnon? Well, I don't actually know what his real Wakandan name was.
Memnon in the Greek when he was like undercover, but it started with a B when he was not. We can call him Memnon.
You're right.
Though. You're right. Yes. I don't even remember the third episode.
That was the one with Iron Fist. That was the Iron Fist episode.
Okay. And then obviously I remember the last one. But either way, my point being, my biggest complaint was I liked how the first or the second episode called back to the first episode. And we got to see, I think it's Nani reappear when she's older. And now we saw how she made an impact past her first mission and like what she kind of went on to do with her life. And I didn't like that I didn't feel like we had those callbacks in the next 2 episodes. Just because I was like, this is already so different. And we might never see this again. So I wish they were just a little bit more cohesive within themselves.
I think that's fair. I also was kind of bummed that they weren't like tighter in on timing that we could see, or even like the second one whose Wakandan name we can't remember, starts with a B, but Memnon, even if it was like, I would have loved it if like then we saw him as an old man or older man and
like, or like a reference towards him and his mission or something.
Yeah, like some sort of connector where like each one has a reference to the last. I do think that would have been an interesting way to go about it. On the flip side, like I see why they didn't, because they were trying to get such diverse time periods represented. And I will say, like, I'm a history nerd, so like I really liked how they were going and jumping around different periods in history, like tying into the whole Trojan horse Achilles myth was
I love that.
Chef's kiss. I was like, oh my goodness, like I know this. And then like on a meta level, like isn't that what the Odyssey is about, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, because on a meta level, like Tom Holland and all those guys are out filming the Odyssey or were over the summer. So I was just like, in the back of my head, I was like, this is interesting. But like, even like I said, from a historical like level, being able to have those references of those stories was cool. But then to even see like different cultures completely whose histories like I don't know as well, and like understanding that, but then still tying in the legends around the Iron Fist was very cool, and like seeing how that character, you know, made a little cameo in an iteration that we obviously haven't seen. Many versions of the character, or many versions of the mantle before the one that we have seen in live action. So that was very cool. I think overall, what I would love to see if they were to keep doing this is like, it's this fun little anthology that we get once or twice a year, right? Like almost what I think What If was probably originally conceived to be, like completely random, unconnected stories that are just fun ways to explore the universe. I would
Yeah.
love exploring different locations, different time periods that do not affect, because this in reality could have, but it ended up not affecting the larger continuity, but it was ways for us to explore a locale that I think is fascinating in Wakanda and its impact on history over time. It does not have to be this like a big thing, but it can be this really fun, let's sit down for like 2 hours and explore different ways the Wakanda has affected history. I would be really down for that. Low stakes, but like highly entertaining. Obviously, Ryan Coogler being involved meant that it was going to be top tier entertainment no matter what. So I would be very interested to see it again, because I think it was just like an interesting exploration of the universe in a way that like we've never done it before, but doesn't have to like hurt my brain to think about how it fits into everything else.
I think if they went that route, I would not feel like my complaint is as valid, which is good. Like, I would want that. I think because, as I said, like, to our knowledge, this is it. These 4 episodes are all we're ever going to see of this. I'm kind of like, well, in this case, and I like your comparison to What If, because it would be like dropping 4 What If episodes and then being like, see ya.
Yeah.
Never gonna see you
Yeah.
again. Never gonna put anything else out there. So I would, if we went forward with it, I think that would actually make me feel better about it, rather than sitting here and I'm like, yeah, these were cool 4 episodes, but all right, like,
Yeah.
we're not gonna ever entertain this idea of watching the War Dogs and kind of the different stories behind them and the different history and everything. We're never gonna see that again. So it's like, uh, all right, sure. But I will say, I think, okay, I'm impartial towards the second episode just because I love Greek mythology. Percy Jackson fan out here. I mean, like, I am who I am. I know that. But I actually really enjoyed the 4th episode because it did do something different than the rest of them. And you mentioned What If, and I'll say it here as well. This one felt like a What If episode.
Mm-hmm.
Something went wrong or went against the timeline, but we watched it happen and we didn't know it was happening when they did it. And then we were seeing the effects essentially of the fact that it happened. And then, of course, I have to be the first one to bring this up because I'd be offended if I didn't get to be. Then to see that final shot be Eric Killmonger, I mean, chef's kiss, I was like, this is it, because it didn't need to tie to the bigger MCU, but that last second, that last just on my screen moment was enough for me to be sitting here like, what? I literally went, what the F? Like, I was like, because I was so thrown off, but like I clocked in because I was like, nope, Eric Killmonger is on my screen, therefore I am sat and paying attention for the 5 seconds he's there. So I want to focus in on that episode because I do think, while maybe not talking necessarily about the greater MCU story of it, because I'm not sure that's really the story, we did also address time travel in a way that's a little different than how we've addressed it in the rest of the MCU, which I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't talk about arguably the biggest part of these 4 episodes.
I hate time travel, and
I know.
I don't want to talk about it, but I will.
Know.
Okay, but before we dive into like my least favorite topic of all things that we cover on this show, I do want to say the moment when
I thought that was the multiverse.
Look, they're so connected. Like, to me, the multiverse and time travel are like one and the same. Like, the level of hate is like, okay, here it's equal for both. Yeah. I really just topics that I'm gonna be so excited when we move on from. Like, if they had been executed well, I would not feel this way, but they have been, as we've talked about, so poorly executed across the entire universe that I just hate them as topics. But anyway, when she was explaining, and I forget again the name situation, sorry, but when she
Yeah.
was explaining how they needed to put the axe back because later on someone would explain to a future king that they need to open up Wakanda, and like that was going to be what helped her and the Wakandans beyond even him save the world because they were going to be a more open society in relation to the rest of the world. I was like, hmm? And I was like, my
No,
little, like, I was
same.
starting to like think about it. And
Oh, I didn't
then,
think about it at all. I literally was like, "Oh yeah, makes sense." I didn't put it because again, I'm like so far removed from the MCU. So I wasn't thinking for a second, and that's why the ending I was like, "Hold on. How'd
well,
we
when she
get
was saying
here?"
about like opening up, I was like, wait, but they didn't open up before T'Challa. And then when they had the axe again, I was like, wait a minute. So then when they showed Killmonger, I was like, I knew this scene was coming, and I was like so excited. But anyway, so yes, let's get into my least favorite topic, but I did have to talk about that process for me.
Yeah.
I agree. It is yet a different way to speak about time travel and its ramifications, right? I think in every time that we have been, not every because they're confusing, but I would say the vast majority of the times that we have spoken about time travel and the consequences of going back in time and changing something, it has been in the realm of, okay, if you change it, a new branch start. If you
Right.
change it, the butterfly effect. I mean, they literally say in Endgame, the butterfly effect isn't real, that's fake. Yet then this was developed and it literally shows the butterfly effect. You don't put it back exactly where it was before, then, you know, our future is completely swamped by this swarm thing. Or you take it, essentially, you take it away and you have changed the future. So, very, very confusing unless, like, we're talking she's from a branch universe, in which case then it sort of works. But again, just like another example of the universe as a whole not really talking to itself in terms of what are the actual like real lived implications of time travel.
Yeah, cuz my understanding of it was my understanding at this point at all points is everything is on the sacred timeline unless you tell me otherwise. Right? Like
Yes.
that's kind of my general understanding. So like obviously with the multiverse, like I'm going to use Fantastic Four as an example, they are not. They are not in our, you know what I mean?
Correct.
So that being said, everything in this show should have been on the sacred timeline, including the fourth episode. So the axe being moved for some whatever reason would have created the branch to exactly what you were saying. That would be my understanding of all of this.
Well,
So,
because the axe would have been recovered by Wakanda and put in their artifacts room
right,
versus ending up in the British Museum.
exactly. Well, exactly. So that was the change though, is that it
The what if
wasn't.
moment.
Yes, yes, exactly. So I guess my only other thought process is because you are right, and I'm pretty sure they also explicitly say in Endgame like you can't. Yes, to the butterfly effect, and also like the whole you can't go back and change the past to alter the future. Like it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So because that's the whole thing with the stones too. Like they didn't change anything on purpose. The whole point of it was they were taking the stones out, bringing them to our current, like where we were, to use them there.
Well, unless actually I feel like I'm going to take back everything I just said. Because hear me out. If you're thinking about it the way the stones are, what was Cap's mission that everybody wants the side story on? He has to return the stones to the precise location and the precise moment that they were removed from the
Right.
timeline. So if in the sacred timeline, oh god, I thought I would never have to utter that again. Actually, I knew I would have to, but I rued the
Yeah, it's
day.
like we're literally like catapulting ourselves towards Doomsday and Secret Wars.
I know, but I was like, maybe it'll never happen again. But what when you're on the sacred timeline, I think the way I'm envisioning it now, because you jogged something for me, is like the way the sacred timeline goes, that axe remains in the clock. It is recovered by the Italians, presumably, and at some point ends up in the British Museum. Between point B and D, C doesn't matter. We just know that it ends up at the British Museum because it remains in that Italian occupied country. But if he, by removing it, then he was actually starting a new branch because it's meant to stay there, in which she came back from, where that swarm was able to conquer Earth because Wakanda stayed isolated. So it actually is not the butterfly effect. It is her trying to keep them on the sacred timeline and essentially keeping her, well, I don't want to say her branch, but the branch that she came from ever starting.
Yeah. That's exactly what was happening.
But that's literally the exact opposite of what I just said.
But that's what was, well, you didn't let me finish, but that's what was happening, because that's why she even said, like, she's, okay, I'm paraphrasing because this isn't exactly how she said it, because I don't remember exactly how she said it, but essentially that they were robbed of the future that was supposed to be theirs instead because that axe got removed.
Oh, I
like,
missed
she
that
knew.
part.
Okay,
I missed that.
well, she knew that was the point, because that's why she came back, because she was like, the axe was removed, and if that axe would have never been removed, our country's borders would have not been closed during all of this. Like, she's one of those that I assumed on the timeline is going to exist no matter what. Like, obviously we know when branches happen, things could be completely different to a point where, like, I don't know, Hulk and Natasha could have some weird baby eventually and figure out how to do it. You know what I mean? Like, that's how, like, and I do that because I am, you know what I'm adding at. You all know what I'm adding at. But it's possible, and therefore that kid could be like something, you know what I mean? And that could really severely alter something. She comes across the way, because she's a part of the royal line as well, that she would have been born regardless. Like, she is a descendant no matter what that future was going to look like. So she ended up figuring out, now that I didn't catch how they figured that out, but I fully didn't understand that. But
yeah, that
either
part
way,
I don't get.
yeah, I don't know how they figured that out, but either way, they did, and that's why she was like, "This is the moment that if this is not put back, like, we are supposed to have a completely normal future, because the sacred timeline, let's not forget, also works circularly. Apparently, I don't want to talk about
I
that,
don't want
but
to talk
that
about
whole
it.
concept, unless there's a branch, but she is not technically like wrong as a person on that branch. She is supposed to have a very normal future if that axe stays where it's supposed to be."
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm tracking with you. I think my like gut face value reaction was, oh, if they put it back, it changes. It's the butterfly effect, right? The idea that the past
Oh
then
yeah,
affects the
no.
future. But when you started explaining it, it's actually not quite the reverse, because I don't know what the reverse of the butterfly effect is, but the idea of like, no, they were just trying to like essentially prevent a branch and like keep things swimming nicely
Yeah,
on
like,
the sacred
almost in its
timeline.
own way, the past went off kilter by accident.
Yeah. By his
Because
ambition in getting
yeah.
that axe. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
typically I guess that, like, however that's supposed to go initially, that's not it. Like, he wasn't supposed to get the axe. Therefore, everything should have kept going. That was a branch that quite literally happened by sheer accident, rather than, like, I don't know, like when they were fooling around in Endgame, and obviously things went differently as planned in some of those timelines, in which case, or in some of those moments, in which case they would have created new branches. So, like, that, I think that would be my understanding of it. It's still very confusing to me, because she also interacted with past people and explained things that, like, from my understanding of Endgame, they also, the whole point was like, don't let them see you, don't let them know, like, don't say anything, don't talk to anybody. Like, that's the rules, because they don't want to accidentally alter something else. But that was kind of weird to me as well, that she came back and was like, fully like, put the axe back, because I'm dealing with some bull crap over here in the future, because you guys decided to steal it.
Yeah, it definitely is interesting. Also, thank you for workshopping that with me, because I clearly was reading that wrong. But it definitely is interesting, because I think we touched on this a little bit ago, but like, I don't understand how she knew what her proper timeline was, like what the proper series of events were. Like,
Yeah.
because if you think about like a branch, right? Like the most prominent branch we know of is the one it got pruned, but like the one where Loki escapes, essentially.
Yeah.
And like he had no idea until he interacted with the TVA, like what was truly supposed to happen to him, and he saw the video of like the sacred timeline and like all that stuff.
Right.
So what was her equivalent of like the TVA video that showed her like, oh, I should actually be living in like a beautiful Wakanda and like, you know, living my life as the ruler there, and like we're still prospering and everything is wonderful, and we're also open to the world, and like everything is great because my ancestors have made all of the right decisions and like everything's awesome. How did she know that like actually I deserve better than this? Like I'm so confused.
Yeah. No, that's the part I didn't follow. So I was a little confused for a while regarding the time jumps of her going, like, that whole time travel thing, because I was like, I just don't understand how you knew that this was wrong. And
Yeah.
also, not and again, what I kind of what I was just saying, it happened by pure accident, which is what threw me off, because we're watching it like normal, we're not thinking anything of it until she comes in and is like, you weren't supposed to get the axe. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, how is that supposed to go differently though? What caused it to go off kilter? Because you're saying like it's somebody's actions, but how does that play in? So we're definitely overthinking it, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
it's still something to consider, because again, like, we don't see a lot of time travel in the MCU. When we have, it's been kind of inconsistent. When we've seen the multiverse, it's been kind of inconsistent. So I do think, especially because they pretty much confirmed like this all feeds through our Black Panther story, like directly through the idea that Eric Killmonger comes around, steals that axe right out of the museum, and all the events of Black Panther happen, which cause Wakanda to open their borders. Like, that is the implied correct way, and that's why I think it's important to kind of talk about it, because it does affect the bigger MCU because of that. It does play directly into a movie we saw in 2018.
Yeah. It is. I want to circle back to what you were talking about with her interactions with like the people in the past. I don't know if I was like going to try to give some justification for that. I wonder if like the reason that especially the Avengers when they go back in Endgame could not interact is because they were literally in a space where their past selves were, right?
True.
So it was more like literally the America's ass scene, but like you want to avoid that exact scenario because that's your past self. So you're literally directly affecting the decisions that will then directly affect how you, I mean, no, because not butterfly
But
effect, but like
well, I
you,
will say though, think about the fact like Tony interacts with his father. That's not
yeah,
exactly the same, because in that case he's not interacting with himself. He was only a baby at the time. He ends up interacting with his dad, even though they were like, don't interact with your father. Like,
yeah.
so yeah, I mean, I do see your point though. Like, there's not a version of her that exists, but technically speaking, like, there's not like, there is a version of him, but like nobody's gonna know that baby's gonna be him until Howard gets older and he's like, now that's strange. I met a man that looked just like you in whatever that time frame was, because I don't remember. So
Well, he doesn't quite live long enough for Tony to look
no, but
quite
he
like
he
that.
does he I mean, as he's like 20 when they die, right? So
Yeah.
like he does start to see the features, because we see that in the beginning of Civil War when he does his little like mind thing. You could see him.
Barf or fart or whatever it's called.
I feel like it's barf, because isn't that the whole thing that
Yeah.
Mysterio's like, and he named it barf.
I knew it was some sort of bodily function that only
Yeah,
like an immature man could come up with.
yeah,
But yeah, I know that is definitely interesting because then if you think about like one of the other things that I think was a huge theme in this show is just like Wakanda's not just advanced in the 21st century to the point where they're
yeah,
like hundreds of years ahead of the 21st century. No, 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 no. They've been doing that for hundreds of years, like literally
yes,
like hovercraft airplanes in like what was it like the late 1890s in China. I was like that's insane. Like in America we barely had steam engines, and I'm referencing America cuz we grew up here and I know the history better, but like we barely had the steam engine. Like that's
yeah.
insane. So like the other thing to think about then is like if you think about how advanced Wakanda has been for literally thousands of years, like in the Greek episode where he was basically doing like what is the X's and the dots and dashes and I can't think of Morse
Yeah.
code, that little thing he had in his hands. I was like, they don't have any of that for hundreds
No, they're basically
of years.
texting. Like, they're literally basically texting.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so thinking about that knowledge about time travel and what's going to happen in the future in the hands of a society, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but just the sheer ramifications in the hands of a society that is truly the only one on the planet that is capable of actually understanding the gravity of it
Yeah.
and what can be done with time travel. I mean, you've now planted a seed in the brain, essentially the brain of the world, like literally the most advanced society on the planet.
Yeah.
So that's another thing where I'm like, that's fascinating that she just dropped all that knowledge into the hands of the only people who could truly do anything with it.
Well, and not even just her. I'm thinking, and not that like I'm saying the Greeks could have done it, because to your point, they don't have that technology. But in that example, obviously Achilles ends up dying. My thought process is, theoretically, is that supposed to happen? Like, because that's like such a specific time. Like,
Yeah.
and such a specific moment. The other ones weren't like that. This one was so specific to something that you could literally like pinpoint in a history book, this idea of when this happens and the Trojan horse and all of that. And so that had me wondering a lot too, because I was like, all right, this guy infiltrates for 9 years to play this part. And is Achilles, like, I was trying to pull back. I was like, all right, try to remember your really ancient history
I
and
know.
like your really ancient lore. And I couldn't remember. Obviously, we know Achilles is known for the Achilles heel. That's the whole point. He dips in the river Styx and he gets that whole like, I'm invincible except for one spot, aka his heel. But then obviously we saw him, Memnon, slice his heel. And I was like, but was that just like because it's Achilles? Or was it because he knew to go for his heel? Like, I couldn't, there was no reaction to it.
But the thing that they talked about a lot about in that episode too, which I think makes it so meta and so cool, is like, oh, but the legends are just stories. So the idea of like they're probably not gonna ever, the storytellers, I should say, are probably not ever going to share the story of how Achilles was essentially betrayed by one of his closest friends.
Yeah.
Instead, I wouldn't be surprised if like they took that story, oh, he got, cut in what is now the Achilles heel, but they created the entire legend that we know simply because we had a Wakandan war dog cut him on the heel. Like, how actually cool and meta is that? The idea that Memnon was the principal driver in what became like that whole legend and
Right.
like mythology.
Well, that's kind of why I liked specifically episode 2, and I almost kind of would have liked to see 1 and 3 emulate something a little more similar. Now 3 had the Iron Fist come in, as you talked about earlier, so I feel like that in its own way was meta in the Marvel universe. We pulled
Yeah.
in a reference to a character we're all aware of,
And not forced
my
at all, which was good.
no, not at all. And like I do think in that case that one played its own role. I think though, I really like the concept of having moments in history be altered, or like, oh, this person that would stand next to them is actually Wakandan, or all that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this is that is what I think drew me to episode 2 so much, is seeing how they played a role in a prominent historical moment. Now, to your point, it could be very meta here, because maybe he was always supposed to be there. That's how things play out on the sacred timeline. And therefore, yeah, Achilles never actually did the whole river Styx thing. He never had the dip in there, and he didn't do that whole whatever. And that just is how the lore got spun around and everything else. Maybe. And that is a very meta way to think about it. But I do think that was so interesting to me to see how they like play into. I mean, I think they had a couple what if episodes that were a little similar, where they'd like take more specific moments and you're like, okay, but now this changed. So how are these characters all playing into this exact moment, whether it's historical or MCU historical?
Yeah. I honestly, that's why I would not be upset to get like like another anthology season next year. Like this time next year, Catch Me Again sat for Eyes of Wakanda. And I kind of like that, like, not every episode was tied to a specific historical moment. Like, they each had, I think, a different flavor that they brought. Like, episode one set the scene. To your point, she then goes on to become the director. So there's a little through line to episode two. Then episode two had that very specific historical reference. Episode three had the very specific MCU reference. And then episode four really tied into like the overarching themes that we're dealing with now in the multiverse. So I felt like everybody was like a cute little ingredient to like a little Wakanda stew that like was very flavorful and fun. And I would like to see, you know, in a future iteration, like what are the different elements that they're touching on there. It could be the same four elements in four different time periods, MCU moments, like relations to, I don't know, maybe it has something to do with mutants in the future because we're like leading up into that. Like, I just think there's so many like ways in that you can approach these stories with. And I honestly, like, the more I talk about it, the more I'm like, okay, I'm going to campaign for this because this was incredibly fun.
Yeah. I mean, like I said at the top of the episode, like, would I have campaigned for it otherwise? No. Like, I really was like, I don't know what to expect out of this. I'm not super into it. You know, whatever. It's being made. Great. We'll watch it. I don't know if I'd watch it again unless the second season came out. And then I think it would be enough for me to be like, all right, I need to take this a little more seriously. It's not just like a little bit of a I'll watch this for 2 hours kind of thing, and there's more to it. So I'm going to be more devoted to it, but I still enjoyed it. Like, it was still, again, it was a fun 2 hours. I was into it. I was really like, all right, this is a different way to look at things, a different way to see things. To your point, each episode kind of had a different either through line or connection to the MCU or something of that nature. So it was enough in there that you weren't completely taken out of it. But I don't know. It wasn't bad. It was an enjoyable little watch. I'm glad it was only 4 episodes. I don't think I would have like I don't think my attention span for it would have lasted much longer than that, but I do think I could see it more being done with it, which would make it a lot more prominent in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. A cute little annual 4 episode drop in like the middle of summer. I'm here for it.
Me too.
Amazing. Well, I think that's everything that we want to talk about for Eyes of Wakanda. It was fun. Kind of came out of nowhere. I think the date, like I said, I think the date got moved, but hey,
Yeah.
cool. That was that was surprising and unexpected. But we are here and we watched it, and for the most part, we enjoyed it. So you can make sure that you are enjoying our future episodes by subscribing on your podcast platform of choice. We have our website linked if you want to check out anything related to the show. That is a good spot. And also in our show notes, you can check out our Buy Me a Coffee if you're interested in supporting the show, which just helps us, you know, reinvest a little bit in it and make it better.
You guys can also follow us on our socials, which are linked in the show notes below, and keep up with the podcast as we have weekly episodes. So make sure you guys come back next week as we have another episode coming your way. And as always, Marvel just blew your mind, so let's talk about it.